Hello everybody, today we're going to be talking about another common issue on the Mark IV ALH BEW, same principle, but for this demonstration we have a ALH turbocharger. Now, very annoying problem. You're cruising on the freeway, step on the gas, 5th gear, 4th gear, boom, power shuts off. Gotta shut the car off again, turn the key back on to get your power back. That there is called limp mode, and it's caused by a variety of things, but most commonly this vane actuator is the problem. I'd say a good 99% of the time. I mean, you could get leaking vacuum lines, seized N75s, a bunch of things, but most commonly this is the problem. Either the actuator or the actual internals of the turbocharger itself. Now, this turbocharger obviously is off the car. It is fairly new, rebuilt. I'm going to be demonstrating with this. Now, what you want to do to check the actuator, you can plug over here on the nipple. I don't have a vacuum line. You don't necessarily need a vacuum gauge. I mean, you can disconnect. You can follow this line going all the way to the N75. Just disconnect it off the 75, suck on it, and you can see by the EGR side of the motor, you will see this moving up and down. If you have a VACCOM, obviously you can use the adaptation to cycle this up and down, but if you do not, you can just use your mouth. Now, change this actuator runs from anywhere. This is a Garrett. You can get Mellet, which is also a very good British brand, on eBay, 40-50 bucks. Or not many auto parts stores sell this. The dealer, forget about it. These guys sell the whole turbo, of course. You cannot sell just this simple little 10mm piece. You have to sell the whole thing. A good $100 for a brand new actuator. You can find them used, but obviously good to put these new with the belly pan still under the car. Should last anywhere between 100 and 150,000 kilometers if you're lucky. Now, to change this, how this is holding is, you have under the car, obviously you have a circlip holding this actuator onto the turbocharger itself. What you want to do is you can use a pick, you can use a flex screwdriver. I really like using a pick, and just pop it out. Of course, it will fly everywhere. You better have a few in stock. You better have at least 3, 4, 5. The more the merrier. Luckily, I just got it. But I will show you a trick how not to lose this while working under the car. I'll get to that towards the end of this video. Once your circlip is out, you put it aside. You don't want to lose it, obviously. You're going to have 2 10mm nuts. One over here and one over here. You take your 10mm key. This is obviously a shorter one, is easier to go work under the car, but since this turbocharger is off the car, you can use any length. Remove the 2 10mm, holding this together. Set it aside. Same thing for the other one right over here. This one's a little bit more of a pain to get to, but under the car it's a little bit it's easier. Take off this 10mm bolt, and you can just easily slide out the actuator just like that. Now, more commonly, this is the problem. This gets exposed to the elements, it rusts through. There's a diaphragm with a spring inside. When it rusts, it gets stuck, it seizes, and since most people, when you're cruising only in the city, this is going to be stuck. The computer's going to stick this down to full boost for stop and go situations, and that's where the majority of the time, since it stays on full boost, it has a tendency of welding itself there. Now, this is, like I said, easily replaceable. Another issue that can cause overboosting is the actual turbocharger itself. This little lever over here is what controls boost. The car's computer sends a signal to the N75 to control this up and down. You have vanes inside this turbocharger which control the speed of the turbine itself, controls the flow of exhaust gases towards or away from the turbine. This is low boost, this is full boost. As you're cruising in a city, stop and go, this is all the way to the bottom. And the harder you drive the car and the less boost the computer needs, it controls this like this. Now, what happens is that with time, the internals of this turbocharger, which is a bunch of vanes, it looks like window blind slots. It's exactly like window blind slots. They can get full of carbon, full of rust, and everything like that. And this actual lever over here gets really sticky, gets hard. Sometimes it can get stuck. I've done cars where this was completely stuck, where I had to remove the turbocharger, open it up, but obviously this is beyond the scope of this video. You open up the turbocharger, you can clean the vanes. It's a long process, but when your turbocharger is good, when your intake and your exhaust turbine blades are nice, there's no shaft play, the seals internally do not leak oil, it's a very big shame to swap out the turbocharger, especially if you're getting a second-hand one and you don't know if, okay, this looks good, this moves nice, but you don't know if the internals are good, you don't know if it leaks oil, etc., etc. Now, this is obviously repairable, but most of the times I've seen this just be a little bit stuck. It's not the end of the world. You can take off the actuator from under the car, break it free by under the car. Obviously, if it's really stuck, you can't use your fingers, it's gonna be way too hard. I like to take a little vice grip, just clamp it over here to the edge. Be careful, you don't want to break it. I've had one case where this actual bracket came off, this lever over here, and I had to modify and put a bolt, a little nut through this to be able to, luckily there's a hole. If this falls out, there's a hole over here, but doesn't rarely happens. Anyways, use a vice grip, break it free. And a lot of cases where it's been minimally or halfway stuck, I'd say a good month of hard driving. Obviously make sure your car's in top shape for this. You don't want any oil in your intercooler, you don't want to cause any runaways, nothing like that. A good month of hard driving, hard acceleration, high RPM cruising at 3,400 RPM in fourth gear on the freeway, I find seems to free this up much better. So I've seen a lot of cases where I told my customers to leave it in fourth gear on the freeway at 115, 120 kilometers an hour, just let it heat up, let it burn out, and a couple months later I go and just check around and this thing moves nice and free again. So this is a problem easily avoidable. Like I said, hard driving, high RPM, high temperature is the key to get this unstuck. But now, let's say this is good on your car. This is what you want. You got to replace this actuator. Inside is a diaphragm. Like I said, this one here is fairly new. It holds vacuum. Now, you get your new actuator. Very big chances it's not going to be set. What can cause overboost also is if this rod too short. I will show you 1 second. This rod here is adjustable, as you can see. You got to loosen this 10mm nut and you turn this. When you're under the car and you're working on a used actuator, this can get pretty seized. My suggestion, which always worked for me, is when it's new, you anti-seize the hell out of the threads, the nut and the actual mechanism over here, and 2 years later you're gonna need to do some adjustments and this is gonna break free like butter and you're gonna be able to move this with your hands like this, very light, no problem. Anyways, so to adjust this actuator, if you don't have, the way you do this is with a vacuum pump, a manual vacuum pump. You want it to start moving at around 18 inches of mercury. You want it to touch the stop screw on the turbocharger at around 18 inches of mercury. That's for stock function, this and that. You don't need a vacuum pump. I mean, they are over $60 at most stores, most auto parts stores, Canadian Tire, your local hardware store, whatever. What I find works, and I've done this on 20 cars and more. Now this actuator over here has a, I made this stopper. I've used this as a stopper because the previous owner on this turbocharger played with the stop screw. He made it shorter and it kind of looks like he welded it there. That's not good. So I've calculated something that this will stop at the stock stop screw length. Let's pretend this is not here for a minute. What you want to do is, if you don't have your vacuum pump, you're gonna have to adjust this regardless. You change an actuator, you're gonna have no choice but to adjust. But if you don't know where to preset the length of your rod, you're gonna be doing a lot of trial and error. You don't have to go under the car to adjust this. You could remove the 90-degree elbow connecting the intake pipe to the EGR valve, and you can go by there blindly. Of course, you're not gonna be able to see what you're doing, but you use a 10mm key, a short one, tie it to a string, make sure you don't lose it, anyways, what I find works is you count about 10 threads, 10 little threads, and you're gonna put your nut about there. 1, 2, 3, blah blah blah, banana, na na na. This is about 10. Let's say this is 10, and you adjust your actuator to that. Now, 10 threads on my car seems to be perfect. Borderline overboost, does not overboost, but I find one thread longer than that, and the car has a slight hesitation in the throttle response, and one hair shorter than that, and I'm overboosting at about 120. If you want to pass somebody, it's going to overboost. My car seems to work at 10 threads. My girlfriend's car, for example, needed like 11, and look, this just fell out. You needed about 11 threads. Now, put it at 10 threads, and you're going to have minor trial and error to be able to adjust this perfectly to your car. You don't need a VACCOM. What you want is you want the throttle response to be nice, barely any lag, but you don't want to overboost. Like I said, around 10 threads. You can gauge yourself from there. The easiest way to do this. Alright guys, now put that little piece back. Now to go put the actuator back under the car, very important, very very important. I can't stress this enough, guys. On one side, if you compare the two studs on the actuator, on one side behind here, it's covered with this heat shield. There's a hole, there's a vent. You want it to be covered with the stock heat shield, cover the vent, and you want it to face the exhaust side of the turbine, of the turbocharger. So since the hole is on this side where my thumb is, we're going to put this back in. Align it. You're gonna have to wiggle a little bit. Align the two studs with the hole like so. And a little tricky part, it's not as hard as it looks under the car. It's pretty easy. You want to put this and align it with the lever of the turbocharger. You can use a pick, you can use anything you feel free to use, whatever you want. Put it in. Could be sometimes a little bit of a pain, like that. Now, before you put your C-clip, you don't want to do it now. You take your two 10mm bolts and you install them, like so. Take your other one. It doesn't matter if the actuator arm comes off the bracket on the turbocharger. Just for now, you just want to tighten it just a little bit, just to make sure it holds, so you'll be able to push that back in. Take your key. Get ready with your key. Tighten it up by hand first, or else you're going to be very frustrated. And just tighten it up just lightly, just for it to hold, so it doesn't wiggle as you're putting back the bracket, like so. Tighten it a little bit. Now, you don't tighten this nut yet, because you're gonna have to do an adjustment obviously before you basically get out from under the car. You leave this nut loose for now. Now we're flying. Now, the tricky part. Just getting this back in there a little bit. Like this. Maybe use a flat screwdriver under the car. A flat screwdriver will be your best friend. I can tell you that. Now, your C-clip. Or if you don't have the stock C-clip, it's not the end of the world. You go to your local hardware store, you get 1/4 inch E-clips. They're really really cheap. You can get them pretty much anywhere, and if you're really stuck in a jam, you could use, and I've used this before, it's worked. Not the best solution in the world, but it's good to get you out of a jam. You know those paper clips, the black ones, the ones with those metal Mickey Mouse looking type of clips, the ones you gotta push with your thumb and it's like a big alligator mouth. That metal clip will work. You have to play with it a bit, but it's okay to get you out of a jam. The best is you get yourself a bunch of 1/4 inch E-clips. Now guys, what you want to do is you can take fishing string or floss. I like to use this Oral-B Complete floss to tie the E-clip over here. You want to tie it to a string, this way you don't lose it, because you got to be really lucky to get the E-clip onto this lever your first try. What usually happens, what always happens, you're going to go put this E-clip and this thing is just going to spring and fly onto another dimension. You will never ever ever find it again. Gone. Disappeared. Forever. So, use your floss. I like to use a floss. I find it works best. Under the car is a little bit tricky. Use patience. Do not get frustrated. You might drop it a couple of times, but you have it tied to a string. If you do drop it and you don't know where it is, do not pull hard on the string. You will lose it. Follow the string. Use a magnet, use a flashlight, whatever you got. But like I said, it's always good to have a couple of those on hand. Now you want to align. You want to make sure that you see the track of where this E-clip is going to go, which is right over there. That track right there. The little space, the little indent you see on that lever is where you want it to go. Once you have your E-clip aligned with the lever on the turbocharger, you have your string. This is on the floor. This is just for demonstration purposes, but you can put it anywhere. You like to take a flat screwdriver and just gently push like that, and it's going to spring right in. And that's it. You can either leave the string, or this time you can pull it out of there. You don't need it anymore. Now, to adjust, like I said before, you want to start with 10 threads. You're going to have to adjust this, but what the point is here is you want to eliminate as much trial and error as you can, because you want to get back in your car, you want to drive it. You don't want to start struggling for about 2 hours trying to adjust this properly. So you start at 10 threads, see the way the car responds. If you don't have a Vancom, like I said, you want barely any throttle lag, and you don't want any overboost. You probably do with this method over here of 10 threads exactly. You're probably gonna 5, 6 maybe trials instead of 20, 25, you know. So you adjust it to 10 threads. You leave this nut loose. You adjust it however you need. Once it's adjusted, you take your 10mm. You don't want to tighten it too much. Believe me, you're just gonna probably overstress this clip over here, and it's gonna break, or you're just gonna pop it out again. You're gonna have to start everything all over again. Believe me, that is not fun. Tighten it a little bit. As you're tightening, you're gonna start turning the arm of the actuator. That's enough. Do not tighten more than that. You can use your flat screwdriver to just turn this back to the way it was before, or by hand like that. That's it. You want it like this. You don't need to over tighten this. Very likely. I've seen, it's happened to me, that this was not tight enough, and with the vibrations and everything, this got loose and it was just going down and down and down, and so was this guy going down and down and down, because with the anti-seize, this will remain loose and it will not rust. And I've got an overboost issue because of that. When I went and tried and check, because my actuator on my vehicle was fairly new, I realized that this nut was loose when I went to put my hands. So guys, make sure that this nut is not too tight, but tight enough. Once that's done, you just retighten your 10mm nuts. Again, you don't have to go crazy. You don't have to torque this 55 pounds of torque, but you just want it to hold. You want it nice, like this. You don't want to strip anything out. Like that. And there you go. Now, you can plug a vacuum line. You can either use your mouth to suck on it, or you can use a vacuum pump. But that's it, guys. That's how you change your actuator. And this is going to work fairly nice for a very long time to come. Good trick to keep this working nice. Like I said, freeway, high RPM, high temperature. Seems to work. Alright guys, good luck.